2023 is going to be remembered as one of the best and unfortunately worst years in the history of video games. It's the best because, for my money, as far as releases go, I would put 2023 up against any other year for anybody else. I think 2023 is a deep enough year that it is the top best year we've ever had. But unfortunately, all that great success has somehow also came with thousands of jobs being lost in the video game industry. That is just kind of baffling to think about when it's video games are doing better than they ever have, both from a quality and financial standpoint. Games make more money than they ever had, and they're still losing jobs. It just sucks. And in a year that's been this good for the games, I think it's really important to think about for a second who's responsible for making those games exist, and just hoping that something gets better going forward. Now, number one. What is the number one game and what I just said is the best year of gaming of all time? It's been at the top spot for me for months now, for I think 5 or 6 months, honestly. A couple games almost took the throne from it. I considered it, at some point I considered Baldur's Gate 3, Tears of the Kingdom, and Hogwarts Legacy. All at one point was like, are they my favorite game? But none of them could take him down. None of them could take the number one spot down. They are still standing strong. What's crazy is I almost didn't even play this game right away. I was gonna buy it and be like, I'll come back to that later. But I bought it and I decided, you know what? I hear the demo and the first few hours is very good. I'm gonna stream the opening hours on launch night. That'll be good for the channel. Boy, those opening hours, incredible, made me change everything. I ended up no-lifing this game, dumping 80 hours in to get to 100% complete. I'm so glad that I did. Final Fantasy 16 kind of came out of nowhere for me in a way that I just cannot believe that this game gave me both some of the best emotional payoffs I've ever had in a game, while also coming with some of the most epic, jaw-dropping, spectacular set-piece moments that I've ever seen, all crammed into one in a game I didn't even expect to love this much. So let's get into it. Let's start by talking about that demo. The demo takes you through the opening hours of the game, where you get sort of an origin story for our main character, Clive Rossfield. When this game was in its preview window, people said it was like if Final Fantasy met Game of Thrones, and they were so right. It's got political intrigue with people of rivaling nations, family drama, backstabbing, and some absolute gut-wrenching moments. And that's just in the first 3 hours of the game. It does such a great job showing off what makes this game great. You get to feel for the characters, get to know Clive and how he thinks and feels about his surroundings and his situation with his family. You learn about some of the dynamics of the Rossfield family and their leadership over the Kingdom of Rosaria. If you have any interest in this game at all, play this demo at least to see this brilliant opening sequence. The story overall is one that a lot of people have poked holes in, but I truly loved all of it. It follows Clive through his life after the events of the opening sequence that I won't spoil, and he ends up being found by a man named Cid. Cid is a staple of the Final Fantasy games, and this iteration of him might be my favorite one yet. Cid is the leader of a rebellion of sorts, and he wants to destroy the Mother Crystals, the source of all magic in the world. People rely on this magic to live, but using that magic is also slowly destroying the world. There are also people who are born with innate magical abilities that are called bearers. They are enslaved and treated as less than human in the world of Valistia. Along with destroying these crystals, they want to free bearers from their lives of slavery and give them a life of choice, being able to do what they want versus being stuck in their terrible situations where their magic is used until it literally kills them. It's sometimes a little clunky when addressing a topic as heavy as slavery, but seeing how different people react to people who are or aren't bearers, or who carry the bearer's mark like Clive does, is really interesting, and all of the voice work in this game is better than any Final Fantasy game before. With a big world with tons of characters and nations to keep track, they created a system called active time lore in this game, and it was a huge game changer. During any cutscene, you could stop the game and active time lore would provide sections to hover over to get a breakdown of every person, location, country, and organization that is involved with or mentioned during that cutscene that show you information about them. They even change what shows up throughout the game. Like, you can hover over Clive in the beginning of the game and the end of the game, and it'll tell you very different things. It's catered to where you are in the story, but also how they would interact and relate to the other people or places in the story or in the scene. So if 2 different nations are mentioned on screen, they would give their breakdown of who they are, but they would also mention how they relate particularly to the other one. So it's not just like the same info dump to read over and over again. It gives you the context of what's happening and what you're supposed to be thinking about, which in a game like this can really help at the very beginning. A huge part of the story and world is how the traditional summons are implemented in this game. Instead of the summons being called upon, certain people are blessed with the powers of a certain icon, which are what the summons are called. Each kingdom has a particular icon that they control. The Rossfields had the power of the Phoenix, which should have been given to Clive, but somehow it passed over him and went to his younger brother Joshua instead. Whoever the icons are fully transform into the icons, aka summons. These icons end up being very crucial to the story and are responsible for the most epic moments I have ever seen in a game. These icon battles turned Final Fantasy 16 into a Godzilla game, where you get to play out these massive cinematic kaiju-like battles. These set pieces left my jaw on the floor every single time. Special shoutouts to the Titan and Bahamut battles specifically. These are both my number 1 and number 2 fights in any game I've ever played. They're so incredible because of how cool they are, but also what really sets them apart is the why these fights are happening, especially with Bahamut. That makes them so unforgettable. Sometimes these fights, no lie, last 30 minutes, which seems impossible. Like, how could that ever still be good? But like, not are they that long, they're still satisfying. They look amazing the whole time, and you don't want them to end after 30 minutes of the same fight. That seems impossible, but Final Fantasy 16 does it every single time. 16 isn't the first Final Fantasy game to ditch the turn-based combat of old, but this one is probably the most straightforward action game in the series. You have companions in a party, but you only ever control yourself and your trusty wolf, Torgal. Some people didn't like this, but I really enjoyed being able to just focus on my build as Clive and let everyone else just fight for themselves. With the game so centered around Clive and his story, it makes sense for this game to be much more of a solo adventure than building a party like other Final Fantasy games. The combat itself is very simple yet deep. You have just your basic attacks, then R2 plus a face button for cooldowns, with eventually 3 loadouts to cycle through on the fly. Mixing and matching the different abilities that all work well together is a fun mechanic. I loved building different layouts that were better for large groups of enemies or boss fight builds that were more single target focused. Each icon has abilities that Clive can master that all have a certain look to them, that when all of them get used in the battle, the particle effects were breathtaking. I think that's a good summary of why I love this game so much. Over my 80 hours with it, so much of it was just a spectacle, whether it was the giant massive kaiju battles of icons fighting each other or just the actual combat as Clive, with just all these colors and whips and slashes and magic flying all over the place. Like, it all just looked insane to behold. I loved every second of it. Final Fantasy 16 is what is now being called an open zone game, where it's a game with smaller sections that are like mini open worlds, and I prefer that over one giant map. It was nice having it segmented to help it be more approachable in my opinion. There aren't really any icons to go and explore. It's just main and side quests that will send you all over the map to explore everything. But I was more interested in the story of what was happening, so I'm glad there wasn't as much fluff in this game. Hogwarts, I loved them because it added to the world, but I felt like I got enough of that from just the story here and it wasn't really needed. There are a lot of things about this game that I love that I can't talk about because they're story moments or some of the jaw-dropping moments that I wouldn't want to spoil how amazing they are. Something I can talk about though is the voice work, specifically for Clive and Cid. It is no secret if you've known me since June when this game came out, but I have a giant man crush on Clive's voice actor, Ben Starr. He has been absolutely crushing it in the video game space this year and has become a beloved celebrity. He does so much great work for so many outlets, and him being so awesome and funny outside of the game genuinely makes me love this game more, knowing such cool people were involved in making it. I don't want to take away from his performance though. He absolutely owns this role, and you can tell that he lived and breathed Clive Rossfield. He's a massive Final Fantasy fan, and he wanted to do right by the series and this character, and he nails it. Ralph Ennison is also brilliant as Cid in this game, both as a charming leader of the revolution, but also as a mentor to Clive. Clive wouldn't have been able to get to where he is at the end of the game without the wisdom Cid gives him to get there. Ralph also had a really prominent character in Diablo 4, so my June was just filled with hearing that incredibly deep voice of Ralph's, and he was so good at both games. A special shout out to some other great characters too. Gav is sort of the right-hand man of Clive, who has a wonderful source of comic relief in this game. Dion was my favorite of all the other icons. He felt like a Jaime Lannister to make a Game of Thrones comparison. Troubled golden boy son of the Emperor who struggled with some inner demons, and his determination to do good by his people, trying to do what's right, and what to do when those can't be done at the same time. Clive's brother Joshua does so much with how little he is around that makes him so memorable, and that bond Clive has with his little brother has made me think of my younger brother Brandon and how, especially growing up, I would have been willing to do anything to stick up for him and make sure he was safe. So many of these characters are written in ways that make them feel so real and believable. In a Final Fantasy game, that's not always the case with how extreme and out there they can be, but this one is different. I mentioned earlier that people have said that this game is like Game of Thrones, and I really think those comparisons are why it landed so well for me. I loved Game of Thrones, until they ruined the ending. But the massive scale of the world, with all the moving pieces and political intrigue, made it all so interesting. With these massive, amazing action pieces in between this great world building that really had me hooked on this game. This is the first Final Fantasy game I have actually finished, and I'm very proud to say that my first one was 16. I know to some people that my number one game of 2023 being Final Fantasy 16 is going to be kind of a hot take, maybe even hotter than what Legends Arceus was, but I can't help it. I love what I love. All I can do is just be honest with myself, and the more I looked at it, the more I kept coming back to this game and my memories of those different story pieces, the action pieces, and how much it was a combination of like some of the most, like I said in the beginning, emotional moments I've ever seen in a game with like just gripping, incredible voice acting that for a Final Fantasy game especially, for some reason just made it even more surprising, while also having just like the biggest, baddest set pieces I've ever seen that rival a God of War or a Horizon and like just like a massive spectacle on the screen. To me, being compared with Horizon and God of War is about as good of a compliment as I can give a game. Final Fantasy 16 is yet another game on this list that I feel like is a must own, especially for PS5 users since it's an exclusive right now. No PC port is coming soon, but I'm just so thankful I got to play such a big and awesome game that I was excited for going into it, but it still ultimately shocked me for how much I really loved it.
Awaken, child of fate. Awaken, Ifrit.
Oh boy, that is it. We have finally got through my entire Game of the Year list, and it is an incredible list, if I do say so myself. My script, without counting all the improv I was doing and some of my looking at the camera stuff, 17,935 words I wrote for this. On my Google Doc, it is 27 pages long of text of me just gushing about games I love this year. So I would love to know in the comments, do you agree with my list? What was your favorite game of 2023? Do you agree that it's the best year of gaming ever? And if not, what year would you put up there? I know 2007 is kind of a close second with 2023 for a lot of people. Let me know, what were your favorite moments of 2023 and what are you looking forward to in 2024? I know a lot of people think it's going to be a light year, but people say that there's always going to be stuff to play. There'll be some surprise games out there. There'll be some Cocoons, some Sea of Stars, games like that no one Dredge, Dave the Diver. I know I didn't play that, but that was a huge indie darling. There's games that come out of nowhere every year, and I know that'll happen in 2024 as well. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this journey to go through my games. This is my favorite type of content to make every year, where I count down my games, building my list throughout the year. It means a lot to me to have any of you guys watch this stuff and care at all what I have to say about games. Thank you so much, and until 2024, listen to my dad, and I'll see you in the next video.